Okay, welcome everybody. It's our weekly 4D class. And per request of participants, we have esteemed 4D providers doing guest appearances. And this week, we're very fortunate to have one of the great 4D providers of all time, Frank Martin. Has
I
done
love it when you talk like that.
130 workshops
Something close to it. Yeah.
and almost all NASA. And
Yeah.
more importantly, I think he's worked very closely with the project teams. So basically, it's a Q&A format. Or Frank, you just want to start talking, whatever. I'm just going to fade into the background here.
Well,
It's
don't
your show.
don't hesitate to step in. Let me just sort of frame this a little bit, and that Charlie and I go back to the mid '70s in at NASA headquarters, where we eventually tagged up in the old astrophysics program there, and he was working as a I guess you were on detail working for Al Opp in
When I
the
first came, yeah.
in high energy astrophysics, and I had come in there to do advanced programs and wound up in a reorganization doing advanced programs for the astrophysics program. And what was fascinating about that time was everything was about individual missions. There was no strategic plan, no integrated activity. And so I walked into that as a physicist, really just thinking about how can I put a strategic plan together, which was the big buzzword in the during the Carter administration. He brought in strategic planning, and so NASA and all the agencies were doing it. And so the Space Science Organization had to have a strategic plan. And out of that, we were able to work with the science community and put together more of an integrated view of these various missions. And that led to eventually Charlie, who succeeded me as the director of the astrophysics program, of basically coming up with the concept of the great observatories, which was the framing of the big, large, hard to sell objects into something that was more palatable, and all of those things got implemented. So, and I think one of the connections that Charlie and I have historically is that if you go back to those early days in the '70s and until he wound up leaving NASA, there was almost 2 decades, over 2 decades of one mindset about what to do in astrophysics at NASA. And very rarely does that happen to any of the programs. And I pat both of us on the back a little bit in that we shared sort of a common mindset about how that stuff was supposed to be done and how it could be implemented. And we can sit back now in our senior years and go, yep, we did pretty good. You know, what I thought was a 5-year plan was closer to a 20-year plan, but that's the detail. So anyway, we had that connection, and later on, Charlie and I ran into each other on another astrophysics planning mission called LISA, and we ran into each other in Germany. And during that discussion, he was telling me about his 4D stuff. I guess I'd already may have been in a workshop with you at Ball, but I don't know whether that was before or after, Charlie. And you started talking about how you were looking for some additional help. And this is sort of true confession stuff. Charlie said, you know, he didn't think it would work real well with him doing these workshops at the human spaceflight centers, because he was kind of more of a robotic unmanned spacecraft kind of person. And he's afraid if they got in a detailed discussion, he'd tell him what he really thought about
Well,
money.
actually, it's more than that, Frank. I also don't follow college football, which was a liability
That's true. Yeah. So
they couldn't believe I didn't know anything about it.
So we just sort of divided things up, and I wound up going to the Kennedy Space Center, Marshall, and Johnson Space Center. And over a third of the workshops, or around a third of the workshops that we wound up doing during that period, it was about 15 years, were done at Marshall Space Flight Center. And when you look in Charlie's book and you look at some of the evidence of the impact of the 4D process on team scores, you'll see that difference shown in you see progress on all teams, but the one at Marshall stands out because management up and down the chain made a commitment to using the 4D stuff. And it's hard to find. I think even the center director now, I know she was in several workshops, but the common practice at Marshall was at all levels of management that they were in multiple workshops. And in fact, one of the acting administrators of NASA in recent years and the NAA at NASA prior to that was in at least 3 or 4 workshops. And so it sort of propagated all around the agency. And just recently, and I think part of what stimulated this discussion was I was in NASA headquarters, actually was on a Teams meeting because the primary figure person was away from the office that day. Otherwise, I would have gone in to see him. But the associate administrator, the number 3 person at NASA, is looking into the independent review process, which I'm heavily involved in. Independent review processes that's used for spaceflight projects. All the projects have a project office and somebody that's in charge, but they also have somebody like me with a team of subject matter experts that periodically review what they're doing and report to the center director and to upper management at NASA headquarters, who winds up using that information to make decisions about schedule, cost and schedule, and things of that sort that they use with OMB and with Congress. And so I was having a discussion with him, who I met only in these briefings, so I didn't recognize him at all. But I was asked to send him my resume, and in the resume there's the 4D experience that we were just discussing, and I mentioned that during the introduction, and he said to me, the context shifting worksheet. And we had a discussion. David Mitchell, who's former director of flight projects at Goddard, is his right-hand person now, and David was on the call and probably had no idea what he and I were talking about, because David looked kind of puzzled. And suddenly this man who I barely know, we're bonding around the context shifting process. And so we had a nice little conversation, and he said, he's the former director of Glenn Research Center. And he said, Charlie, he had been in several workshops there. So my assumption is that that you did those, because I've only done a couple of things there, and I don't remember him being in any of those.
I did a bunch at Glenn, yeah.
Jim Freeze is his name.
Yeah, I recognize the name.
Yeah, good, really a nice guy. And I was glad to see somebody with that sort of mindset in that job. And that kind of triggered the thought process. So Charlie and I was always impressed about the context shifting worksheet. I've told Charlie many times that I thought it was the best thing he'd ever done that had to do with the 4D stuff. It was really a powerful, powerful tool. And to the point where when somewhere in the workshop process, I integrated the context shifting worksheet into the material. And I told Charlie about it, and Charlie's so blue. I mean, he's got so many good ideas. I don't think any of those 130 some workshops I did, I don't think that any time the slides were the same from one time to another. Now, I'm a big greenie. I got my badge on today, so I'm a big greenie, and so I would have used the same set of slides that the first time I saw the workshop material. They would, 20 years later, they would have been the same. But with Charlie, they were always different. And so it took a while for him to get around to looking at the context shifting process and how you integrate it into the he was using it in the workshop. I mean, he was using the context shifting process for the teams to work a problem. But what I did with it was I integrated it into the slides where it followed the material, the subject matter. And so, for example, I've got a set of slides here that I'm looking at that's got 600 slides in the deck, 602. And around slide 216, we introduced the context shifting process worksheet for the first time. And then around slide 288, 290, he starts the process of working through. In this case, Charlie uses an example of the proposal team. He supported it, Northrop Grumman, TRW, competing with my team at Lockheed on the for the James Webb Space Telescope. And so he'd go through what's the situation that you're dealing with? In this case, a tough competition is what they were talking about for $1 billion class mission. And what's the outcome you want, to win, to have a good contract, that kind of thing. And then he goes
Excuse me,
into,
Frank, do your screens look normal?
yeah, I don't see you, no.
Other than that, it's okay?
Yeah, I can hear you, but I don't
Okay,
see.
yeah, something's happening here, so I'm gonna let it run.
Yeah, no, I can hear you, and I
Okay.
wasn't gonna put any of this up.
It's not, the view's not ruined for you guys, though.
Yeah,
Okay, good. Let's go.
and I did send out Dorinka. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Yes, hello. Hi, Frank.
Yes. Hi. I sent the context shifting worksheet out to others, but I didn't send one to you. So I don't know if you have one available that you can look at.
Yes, I do. I'll
You do?
just bring
Great.
mine up. Yeah.
Very good. Excellent. So anyhow, what Charlie wound up doing was going through the situation with this proposal team and identifying the situation, the outcome, the emotions that are being experienced, the red storylines that are being run around your ability to win that job, and then the green storylines you need to run in order to help change and manage the context, and then the emotions that need to be expressed. How do they all fit in there? And so that was he'd use that, and then we'd have the project teams or the teams in the room actually begin to work through the worksheet. I would give them 2 worksheets, one that they could make notes for the team project that they were working on together, and we would use flip charts and discuss that as a group. And also let them have a second one so they could fill out some personal thing that they were dealing with. And if they needed help with any of those, we had a coach in the room. I did most of my work with Barbara Walton, but Ann, who you'll hear from next week, was also involved in a number of these.
Ann's coming next week.
Right, yeah. And so anyway, you'd walk through all that, and then what we do after that, once we got the situation identified and the storylines and the emotions around it, we'd go down and work our way through the next section of these things. And let me see if I can just pull this up. Yeah, and start out in the who do you need to appreciate? Because we in the workshop we do the appreciation exercise and the shared interest exercise, and then I'd have them work those 2 segments of the with the context shifting worksheet, so they could address whom do they need to appreciate and for what, and what shared interest with the other party will you address. What do you care about? And so that gets discussed and filled out, and then moved down to the yellow segment. Whom do you need to include and to help you attain your outcome? And what agreements have you broken? Because usually, if you've got a challenging context, there's some broken agreements somewhere. So, have you broken any agreements that need to be processed? And these again all follow those segments in the workshop slides, so it's fresh on people's mind as they do that. And then you move over into the blue quadrant, which is what unpleasant realities must be acknowledged. What's cold hard truth about this situation? Could be I caused it. I'm not. I killed the plant, right? It could be any of those sorts of things. And then the next thing in the blue is what outcomes are you committed to, and at what level? What's your commitment? Are you 100% committed? Are you all in? Or is this I'll do the best I can kind of thing? So the team has these discussions, and you can have them individually on what you're doing. And then finally, and these again follow the sections in the workshop, are there any victim, rescuer, rationalizer, or blamer states that you need to exit? Okay. be honest about that in terms of where you are. It's easy when things are going badly to become a victim or rationalize something away. Or maybe you're working too hard trying to rescue a problem, and it's always somebody else's fault, right? It's easy to do those kinds of exercises. And then finally, are the roles, accountability, and authority clear and communicated? Do we know who's in charge? What's how this thing all works? Because a lot of times you can, in fact, that's part of the trouble with the Mars sample return mission, is that the organization is kind of bollocksed up, and it makes it hard on anybody to try to work in that particular environment. And so once you've worked your way through that, and again, I think the thing that Charlie has done is integrate this the context shifting slides into the workshop such that it can be worked with a team effectively. You go down and after you've filled in all those boxes, you go summarize the actions you will take and a request you will make to get the outcome you want. Okay? You may write down a couple of things, and only one or two of them may be that important to you, but that's fundamentally how it works. And I'm always surprised because the NASA administrator that I talked to this past week isn't the first person I've run into who did one of two things. They always either show me a badge, and oftentimes it's hanging on the wall or it's on their desk, hanging on something on the desk, and they will have so many of them will have a picture of the context shifting worksheet up, or they'll want to talk about it and discuss how they use it and how they use it every day. So that's really all I had to say about the subject. Charlie, if you want to jump in.
No, that's excellent, Frank. I just add one little tidbit. You and I, when we're in very different areas for a long time. You were at Goddard's headquarters.
Yeah.
We didn't even speak for about 10 years, and we showed up in this review in Germany and said exactly the same thing. And I went up to the guy and said, you probably ought to save some money, just bring one of us, because we think so similarly that it's a waste of money to have both of us here.
Yeah.
And they thought we had somehow colluded and gotten together before the meeting. And so Frank and I are sort of doppelgangers, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah, we tend to think, I'm very green and he's very blue. We're both highly intuitive about stuff. But I think it's been a good balance, and we tend to come to the same conclusions very quickly. So we're a little bit dangerous when the two of us are left alone to yeah.
So this is basically Q&A here.
Yeah.
So the audience can ask you whatever they want. Please go ahead, folks.
I can jump in. First, thank you for being here, Frank. It's always a pleasure hearing your perspective. And part of, I guess, my challenge was I've been around you enough that I was struggling to come up with some questions, but I am glad you went through a little history that was able to kind of generate some. So I would love to, if you would be willing to share your version of the 4D workshop, just to kind of see. As you mentioned, Charlie's, rearranging, creating new slides, etc. It's just kind of fun to ingest those. Being a blue myself, I like seeing all those different perspectives. A couple areas that I don't know if it makes sense to get into now or not, but areas that I kind of struggle with that I know you've talked about more, and Charlie has as well, would be the roles, authority, and accountability. I think that is a very simple concept, but it's challenging to implement. So any experiences you had or suggestions on getting better in that area would be interesting. And then the other piece, which is not really part of the context shifting worksheet. I think it's, if it is, it's at the very beginning, but it's kind of identifying what's the problem I'm solving and the criteria for success. I think that the more I kind of dig in, that's an area that I'm not always sure that I'm identifying the right place to put my attention, and then to know that I've been successful. So those are kind of quasi questions and suggestions for additional talking points. Thanks.
You just reminded me of something, and I was taking a quick look, so I missed the last subject you. Charlie, I thought we had put together a roles, accountability, and authority section that we were using.
Yeah, there's a worksheet in the workshop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you?
And Frank, you've actually used that with teams, so why don't you talk about
I'm
how
just
you-
trying to figure.
what you did was, I can think I can tell you what you did, because I did the same thing.
Yeah, I just didn't think about it until right now, and I don't have it in front of me. Go
So,
ahead.
so you give that worksheet out to people, and then you bring it, and you've actually done this, I know yourself, bring everybody into the room and let them tell the group what they're accountable for. In fact, Frank tried to talk me into rearranging roles, accountability, and authority into accountability, roles, and authority, because accountability is so important. And
Yeah.
I said, can't do that. The book's been published, it's done. But what happened in looking at this is that actually, this is what generated some new slides, the fact that accountability is the central piece, and it's the one most often ignored. And what organizations do is they play with authority, and they do that by reorganizing. They think if they can change who's got the authority, but that's not the issue. The issue is accountability. So people then would report what they're accountable for, and then get in subgroups and look for the ways to deal with the overlaps in accountability as two people play in the same position, or the missing accountability, which is more common. And Frank and I worked with a difficult guy at headquarters who was complaining about his role, whatnot. And we're on a telecon, and Frank says, what results are you accountable to produce? And then we heard crickets.
Mhm.
That tells you the whole story. So I think this whole thing about, excuse me, accountability and with a focus on results is something that seldom happens. And if with that same Lisa team had enormous ongoing trouble with this, because they had hidden agendas in play and a bad organization across two centers.
Yep.
And I finally said, the only way I can see you can solve your problem is to put a plaque on your door with what you're accountable for, let everybody walk by and see if they agree that makes sense or not. So that's, Frank's been in, I just jumped in, but you've been in the middle of this problem for a long time.
Yeah, and what I will agree to do, because I don't have it right on the tip of my fingers here. I will see if I can find those slides that we used to address that subject and share them with the folks, and I'll send them out. But it's really the accountability. It's crucial, and that Gene Kranz clip
Yeah,
after the Apollo fire. About accountability is used as part of that explanation to get people to think about what are you really accountable for, as opposed to
I think the slides in the workshop, which you all should have.
yeah. Well, I'm gonna have to look and see, because I recall doing a special segment on that with a couple of different folks, and I want to see if I can get that, and I'll make sure I get it out to folks.
That would be great.
Yeah.
Thank you. And I think the additional clarification, and one of the challenges is, as you know, we've covered all this material at this point, and every time we revisit it, there's like some nuance that I seem to pick up. And I think the folks on accountability, and I had forgotten, but you have also mentioned that, Frank, as being kind of primary. I think that will help organize my thinking around that particular behavior.
Yeah,
So-
in fact, it is, as Charlie said, it's the single most important thing. What can you hold somebody accountable for? What can you be accountable for? And
Right.
build your organization around that, as opposed to what authority do I need, which is the way a lot of people look at organizing, and
Right.
and then they argue about the authority, as opposed to, yeah, have I got an organization that's clean enough so that I can really personally be accountable, and can I hold the people under me accountable, and can I, take care of my boss and my boss's boss with this organization? It makes it a whole lot easier to put together.
Yep. Yep.
You had another
My-
question. You had another subject.
I did, and it's I feel like in my mind it's two sides of the same coin. Initially, it kind of came to me as developing the criteria for success, but the flip side of that is what's the problem that I'm trying to solve, and because sometimes I think we try to solve the wrong problem. So and that's always going to happen. But how can you more reliably identify the proper problem and the criteria for success?
Well, I think what happens with a group, if you've got a group of people in the room, they can collectively kind of come to an agreement on what's the most important problem, and tie that to an outcome and work from there. If you're trying to do this on your own, you might be struggling because you're caught up with all of the storylines that you run. That kind of surround you and keep you from thinking about it. So you might want to invite somebody else who might be a little more neutral about it, but reasonably informed, and discuss it with them as to what the situation of the problem might be. Charlie, I don't know. Do you have anything? Any suggestions?
Yeah. So Tesla did something that impressed me a lot. It's back to where attention goes, power flows.
Mm-hmm.
And so what they did is everybody got a cell phone from Tesla with apps on it, selected apps. And every day it tracked the production numbers for the cars and the cost to build them. And if you did something to contribute to those numbers, you got an on-the-spot award. So
Yeah.
when I look back at Hubble, the way it was structured, but the way the contracts were, I think the technical side would take care of itself pretty well. The technical people are good, and except for the stupid mirror error, really tough technical problems were nailed to the T. But I look back and said, how do you get individuals to worry about the constantly increasing cost? And the answer is that no one's paying attention to it. They're all doing their job. So what if you had what if you had an app that every day updated the projected cost of the telescope? You wouldn't do a bottoms-up cost estimate, but you just look at sort of how you're doing with respect to the contracts and incentivize everyone to see what could they do to make it work better or cost less. That's the kind of idea that appealed to me. Or you could do simpler things. I thought about, say, I've helped out the Marriott managers at time to time. And what if you posted the occupancy rate every day on the wall and said, what can you do to make this hotel more attractive? And there were places where they did that. And the way it shows up is you're coming with a suitcase and the cleaning lady stops her work and opens a door for you. When that kind of thing happens, I'm motivated to go back to that hotel.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that you need to think about, Charlie Munger says, if you show me the incentive, I'll show you the behavior. If you look at what the incentives are, and I think to get people focused on the bigger picture, the bigger objective. At the same time, I like the Tesla scheme where any supervisor can give an award on the spot. And annual awards are stupid, I think. It's much better that someone does something, be able to give them everything from a kudos bar to a check for $5,000 or whatever. So I think it's about how you motivate the people to go toward the bigger issue, which most people, we're so compartmentalized in our thinking and rewarded for that in school that to get people focused on the bigger strategic questions would be the thing I'd like to suggest to think about.
Yeah.
Take your solar panel company. What were the owners 100% committed to? It wasn't success of the business, I don't think. It was something else.
Yeah, they were. I mean, I could hypothesize, but
Yeah.
it was not, in my opinion, actual success of the business. They would use some words that would make you believe that, but when it came down to it, when there were some hard truths that were being discussed, they were unwilling to hear that. Which, that gets to, to kind of put that thought process to bed. That was, I think your suggestion, Charlie, that there are sometimes problems that are just too hard.
Yeah, the two-part category.
Yeah.
That, that was really helpful for me to hear, because like, yeah, they're just not going to get where I believe that they need to get. Not that I'm the arbiter of truth, but it would have been nice to have been a part of a conversation where we could have built towards something. But yeah, that is the criteria development, and identifying success is a challenging area. And I think what I heard is data and information is a great area to start, so that people can understand what is happening in reality, because you may change your mind over time, right? It may be the number of solar panels installed, and at some point it may change, which in my
Yeah, that's
opinion
right.
would be a better change,
right.
is production output,
That's
right?
right.
I can put a bunch of solar panels on the north side of your house. That doesn't produce a lot of electricity
Yep.
for you. So if I can put the right panels in the right spot and get good production, that's a better a better way. So I think I also appreciated, Frank, your suggestion on engaging others. That's an area where I don't do enough in helping to kind of think through that. And I think that's an area that I would love to explore more. And Charlie, we've talked about this a little bit, because like we used to do, excuse me, we used to do in class the post-it process, which I think you have.
The nominal group technique's really potent. Yeah, I've got a better method than the Post-its.
I remember you saying that, and I haven't fully conceptualized it and memorized what you called it. So
I'll talk about that in the future. Let's keep this on.
Sure. Yep. Okay.
Tapping Frank's wisdom today.
Of course.
Just Charlie's right. The slides for roles, accountability, and authority, most of the ones I was thinking of are in the presentation package, in the workshop package, and in this package of 602, it's around 580 plus is where it's in. So if you've got a copy of the workshop slides, a recent set, you'll find roles, accountability, and authority in there. And the bottom line on the accountability and authority, how they play, there's sort of two views that are described in the package. One is that accountability is equal to responsibility plus authority plus capability, or the second one is it's responsibility times authority times capability. And with the first example, all you need is more authority to be accountable. In the first one, in the second example, all the authority in the world can't overcome a lack of capability, which is being 4D capable. So these things all multiply together. They're not additive. And the bottom line takeaway on that slide is authority without accountability strangles an organization. And that's kind of the way it all works. And so, as I said, if you could put together an accountability organization slide, you're probably in much better shape than you are with these conventional authority situations. At least if you're going to put one together that's based on the authority you want to have, and go back and do a continuity check on accountability and see if the accountability can work.
I am accountable to remind everyone that it's time for a break.
Okay.
40 salute time.
All right. Tell me what we do.
Or we do mild physical exercises for about a minute.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so we just do our little squats.
I got you. And give me a yell when you're ready.
Okay, Larissa, are you back? You
Yes, I'm here.
got some questions for Frank?
Yeah, I'll wait until Frank will be back.
I am back.
All right. Thank you very much, Frank, for spending this hour with us. I really appreciate it. I also would like to use this opportunity to thank you right before COVID, right before everything started with COVID. I had the privilege and the pleasure to really be your assistant in the in-person workshop for three or 4 days.
Yeah.
So it's still really a great memory, and I'm really I had the privilege and the pleasure to do the same with Charlie. So Charlie, these are the very good memories going way back. So thank you both for inviting me to be your assistant and really bringing me into this activity. So the question I have, there is always a blurry line, so to speak, between green and yellow. And I was just wondering if you can elaborate on the differences, how you understand it, the green versus yellow. And also, when we will start talking about this, what is the best way? Are you always satisfied when you evaluate the leadership style? Because I'm always sort of afraid is not the right word, but I concern if I diagnose the right sort of color, if you will. So the orange is probably the most easy. It's a self-explanatory. But the rest of the colors can be somewhat questionable. So that's basically it. And the related question to that, as soon as you really assign the color to each different personality and leadership style, how you manage a green, how you manage blue, how you manage orange, and how you manage yellow. So when all of these qualities and traits people in your on your team, you have to really manage it slightly differently, if I may say so. So can you address that? Thank you, Frank.
Yeah, first of all, when we do the color coding process, figure out which quadrant the 4D system folks fit into. I don't make the assignment; they do. This is a self-awareness kind of thing, and because people don't want to be labeled, and oftentimes if it's perceived that we as instructors in this workshop environment are busy labeling them, then we've turned them off. And so what they have to do, just like they use the team assessment and the individual assessments to get information that they can use, this is information that they can use for their own purposes, for their own development, and help them to understand why they may see things a little differently than their friend across the aisle.
Yeah.
And that's all that is. Now you need to understand. I score. Last time I score 6170 green. I am hardcore green, so I don't see any fuzziness on the edge of any of the interfaces. So it's interesting, but I can imagine people who score maybe on the left-hand side of the green and the yellow may have an interesting mixture of that. That just says that they've got strengths in both areas to me. I don't see that as a weakness. And just recognizing that people that are green may be a little more empathetic about people's plights in the world than somebody who's orange, or somebody who is yellow may be a much better communicator, an organizer, and a manager than maybe somebody who's a green or a blue is. Someone who's blue may be full of ideas, but and Elon Musk has got to be blue, right? And you remember our conversation
Yeah.
the other day about yeah, it sure would be nice if he wasn't such an asshole about some of these human side things that he does. But you know, it's not everybody who's blue is that way, but it's more common than not
Oh, yeah.
to see that. So
And
it just helps me if I can kind of be aware and generally know what someone's color is, but uh, I think it's more helpful to the individual to know it.
sure, sure. And for those who are listening this in recording, this is because I'm running classes online. I understand the benefits of repeating things. So if you
Mhm.
wouldn't mind, Frank, explaining to those who are not in our workshops before, when you say score, you score such and such numbers on green. What does
Oh,
it really mean? Because not everyone who is listening might be aware of what you're referring to. Thank you.
Scoring's probably the wrong. There's 7 questions. There are questions that you answer to determine sort of which quadrant you're in. It's your self, basically your self-scoring to determine where you are. And I use score for that. But it's just the number of boxes I checked in each of the categories, which determined which quadrant I was in. I don't have those questions in front of me. It's probably in this workshop package.
Yeah, it's in the workshop. And for
yeah.
those of you who are listening, you probably would have to study those slides anyway. So they are included in the workshop slides. If I'm
Yeah.
not, I think I
Yeah,
think
it's
I
what,
saw them.
yeah, I was just trying to look here and see where it was, and yeah, it's up front. I'm just sort of scrolling through to see if I could actually find the questions.
Yeah, that's okay, Frank.
Yeah,
If you don't mind addressing it from management perspective, how you manage, what's the secret sort of sauce for managing different quadrant people? Like what is the best approach to managing orange versus blue versus yellow versus green?
well, I think first of all, you need to appreciate what may be important to them. If someone's very orange, they're probably going to be much more interested in the organization and accountability, authority, meeting the schedules, that kind of thing. I think you find a lot of NASA project managers that fall into that particular category. Someone like Charlie, who's creative, may be much more effective in a science environment, interacting with scientists. Those kinds of things. You see a lot of scientists who are blue. I mean, that's just sort of in the nature of that. Someone who is yellow, they're very comfortable dealing with people. I would expect that a lot of the yellow folks that are yellow are extroverts. Whereas somebody like myself, who's a hardcore green, I'm a big introvert. And while I care a lot about people, I'm not out looking to hang out with a crowd or go do something. And if I go to a party, you're probably going to see me sitting around in the corner of the wall somewhere, as opposed to out glad handing and saying hello, unless I perceive it as something that needs to be done socially to, you know, so I'm not offending somebody or something like that.
Yeah.
I will confess this, my 5 years ago, it'll be 5 years ago this coming September, we did that workshop with Code 300 at Goddard. That's the safety mission assurance folks. And that's the last workshop I've ever done, was the one you were in.
Yes.
And it was on my 75th birthday.
Yes, we had a
And
birthday celebration.
And you brought in a cake.
Yes.
And we had a lovely thing. And what's interesting about it is, in all that time, I tried to tempt Katrina into scoring herself, evaluating herself to determine which quadrant she's in, and she wouldn't do it because she didn't want to be labeled.
Mm.
That was her reaction. I don't want to be labeled. And so I just sort of let it go. But I'll have to be honest with you. I have no idea what color that woman is, other than she's black. I know that because I can look at her. But I cannot tell you. I was thinking about that and prepping for this. Is that she's really good with people, so I know she's got good yellow skills. she's smart and got more ideas of things to do than I'd ever come up with or ever want to do. She's always got ideas, so she could be blue, but yellow and blue are kind of diagonal from each other. I would think less so green and less so orange. She's always late by at least 30 minutes, no matter what we've agreed to do. And I'm always on time. So it's what I have learned from that relationship is that maybe being on time is as important as I thought it was. It's interesting how you make adjustments when you realize how I think it's her creative side that brings some of that. But I have absolutely no clue, and she and I are dear friends and continue to this day, and probably will for at least the rest of my life. And I have no idea who I'm talking to.
Thank you for sharing, Frank.
Yeah.
And Charlie, if you're still with us, I hope you have access to the audio, right?
Yes.
Would you be kind to really brief us in on your experience managing how you manage orange, how you manage blue, how you manage yellow, how you manage green?
I think Frank hit the nail on the head. I think the first thing you have to do is communicate with people. The norm in human communications is not. So, and the way you do that is you speak to their interests first. I dealt with, I've talked about this before, I dealt with this 1D blue that was head at NASA, and I was the only person that could really,
Yeah.
that's not true. I was one of the few people who could really communicate with him effectively. And the way I did it was I'd always start with the big idea part of it. And I'd take him later into the part that I thought he really needed to put his attention on, which was typically the green or the yellow, which he completely was oblivious to. But, you know, it's the short version is meet them where they are.
Yeah.
So, and by the way, the question of figuring out who you are, I'm going to remind you, the way the workshop's designed is the little exam is the starting point of the inquiry, not the end.
Right.
So you take that information and then you look at things like there's a couple slides that the more holistic picture of the personality, and you study that. And then you can look at where your diagonal is. So it's kind of like there's half a dozen, well, maybe 3 or 4 clues that you sort through and try and figure out what you own. And most people can do this. And it's about the innate abilities you were born with. It's not about what you can do or not do. It's about how you came into the world. And of course, there's always nature versus nurture. And a poignant example is my friend Skip Borst, who was very frustrated because he couldn't figure out where he was, and he tested in other exams like Myers-Briggs blue, and he finally figured out that he was born green, but every force in his life, from his German parents to the Air Force Academy to GE, was pushing him into orange, and he went into blue to survive. But when you really open the hood, he's green.
Great.
So I think it's a really interesting inquiry that takes some time, and Frank's right that you're the best person to do it. I could tell you what I see, but what I see might not be who you are. It might be you've adapted.
Yeah.
Right.
And business organizations will push everybody into orange. So Frank could not have been successful unless he learned to appear orange.
Yes.
Those slides and numbers and project certainty of result. That's what business people do. So it's something that you have to slowly master. But when given your druthers, you go back into your zone. I did the same thing. I projected orange.
Yeah.
But I was comfortable with the blue. You sort of put on a skin persona, if you will. So that's why I think the point is that it's a self-inquiry. You sort of burrow into layers of this. But to just go back and repeat the answer to your question, I think with regard to how you deal with the people, it's really about knowing what, if you can get a good clue into what they really value and go to that first, that gets them engaged in the conversation. Then you can take them into the other parts.
Okay,
But
yeah.
you gotta meet them where they are.
Yep.
And that's the beauty of the badge. If someone has the badge on and so there was, I did a thing for Human Factors once. And I was a little worried because I thought she might push back on this. And I said, how are you with the personality piece? Says, I love it. It's right under my badge. I meet someone, I lift my badge up and show them my color and say, meet me where I live or I won't talk to you.
Mm. Yeah, thank you, Charlie. And we still have about 10 minutes left, and I wonder if Darinka has any questions.
Thank you. Thank you for that. It is certainly a pleasure to listen and learn about that. Well, I very much agree with not labeling people because, well, in my case, I'm predominantly orange, but I do have yellow and I have blue, and I think that shows. So that's my question. How do you really, when you say someone is blue or yellow or any other color, how do you actually deal with the fact that very few people are 100% blue?
Well, I'll again, it really doesn't matter to me because I'm so green. I start from a standpoint of empathy and respect for others, and I live and work in a world that's really orange. I chair independent review boards for spaceflight projects, and I've been doing that for the last 5 to 10 years on a regular basis. So I'm right immersed in the middle of that. And the only thing that the project cares about and the customer cares about is cost and schedule and technical performance. Those are all very orange things. Maybe there's some scientific creativity that goes into the mission concept. So I really spend my life, and spent most of my life, as Charlie has, and from a blue perspective, I spent most of my life working across the diagonal and having to learn that these are important matters to people. And if it matters to my customer and it matters to my project, it matters to me. And so I can put the orange cloak on and go in and do those things and provide those reports. But the advantage I have over maybe somebody who's really orange and is in there sort of exercising authority, which I have a considerable amount of, there's the advantage being coming at it from a green perspective because you're always aware of the human side of these things. You're always sensitive to that. And so I would think if somebody has a little blue in them and a little orange in them and a little yellow in them, that's a good thing, not a handicap. Because you can have some awareness of that. Yeah, I just don't happen to have it. So I have to really pay attention to those other things. And the advantage I have is that I've had to do that my whole life, my whole professional life. I wouldn't have had a career. I'd have been a minister somewhere or a social worker or out in the streets protesting.
Well, thank you. That's really insightful. Thank you very much.
This is a fantastic opportunity for all of us to really ask questions and share our thoughts. So thank you. Thank you to Charlie for doing it. Thank you to Frank for doing it. And really, I also learned from your questions, from Darinka comments and that question. So that's really.
Well, Frank, I've got a question for you. Why don't you describe your experience with, and I'll help you if you don't remember the specific one, but a team who scored in the bottom quintile and chose to ignore it and then failed?
Oh, yeah. It was a flight project at Goddard. And I think it was a gamma ray mission. I've forgotten the name of it now. But we had the team assessment. It was sort of a principal investigator, a scientist-led thing out of my old organization, the science directorate at Goddard. And so Charlie and I talked about this and agreed I'd see if I could provide a little impedance match into that organization to see if we couldn't help them out. And I debriefed their team report, and they were all in denial about it and didn't particularly care for it. I met with the project manager and explained that they needed to make some changes in terms of how they were set up, that they were basically organized for failure. They even talked to the center director and said, if this continues, this project will be canceled. And they changed the project manager, but they didn't change the science team or do anything about what the science team was doing. And the end result was the project got canceled. They just could not perform because they were so dysfunctional. And that's what the assessment, Charlie's assessment told them. But they would not, did not want to accept any of it. So they were that blue that they couldn't, the dominant personalities on that team were so blue they could not deal with the what they saw as more orange recommendations on how they should function. Charlie, did I get
Yeah,
that
that's
close?
perfect. Yep. I got one more question for you. What was your favorite part of the workshops?
I think the ending, and I go back to our friend John Mather. I did a workshop for the James Webb team, which included some of the Northrop Grumman management, senior management. I think they had a VP and a deputy VP for the project that was actually in the room, plus some of the other engineers that you and I've worked with over the years. But I spent 3 days doing a workshop with them. And I think the thing I enjoyed the most was the readout at the end, where you ask people, what did you get out of this? What are you prepared to take back to work with you? And I remember there were several really good ones, but John Mather, who's a Nobel laureate for the Cosmic Background Explorer, that Charlie and I were fortunate to be associated with, he got up and said what he learned was he said, up until the workshop, he thought his main job was to represent the science on the mission and to speak for that. And he felt he was effective at that. But what he learned was that his responsibilities included more than that. He needed to be thinking broader in terms of how to communicate all aspects of what was going on the mission and communicate and support those things for others. And I thought that was incredibly insightful for somebody who's a friggin' genius to begin with. And so it was, I think those report outs are the thing I always look forward to. First of all, it's the end of the workshop, which is good. It's been 3 days of standing up and talking, but it's to see that they actually were paying attention and could speak to something that they thought was important and mattered to them, and that's very satisfying.
Thank you, Frank, and thank you, Charlie. I have a class to catch in 2 minutes and a half, so I
Yep,
would
I
have to
think
sign out.
I think we're about ready to wrap up. Any final thoughts? Last 2 minutes, anybody?
No, thank you for your time, Frank. We really appreciate
It's
this.
always fun.
Greatly appreciated. Amazing. Thank you very much.
Yes, 4D changed my life. That's the bottom line. Thank you, Charlie. Thank you, Frank. Thank you, Darinka. Thank you, Nat.
You got
Thank
the
you.
last word, Larissa.
All right, thank you. Have a